Welcome everyone tonight to the community lecture series from the Humanities Council. My name is Naomi Luzama and I am the program manager at the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, and I have the honor of introducing our guests this evening who've come a long way from Germany. Professor Dr. Thomas Stolz has been chair of General and Comparative Linguistics at the University of Bremen, Germany since 1998. Besides his interest in linguistic topics such as language contact, language change, aerial linguistics, and linguistic typology, he has contributed to the linguistic description of particular aspects of the grammar of Chamorro in a series of publications which span the period from 1996 to present day. Recently, he has taken interest in the place names in the Marianas. He visits today for the fourth time since 2007. And this time he brought a friend and a guest who has been here twice since 2018. Dr. Nataliya Levkovych is a postdoctoral researcher at the Linguistics Department of the University of Bremen, Germany, where she has been involved with several research projects on diverse topics such as aerial phonology, conjunction borrowing, grammatical, gender, in situations of language contact. She has collaborated with Dr. Stolz in some of his projects dedicated to Chamorro. She co-authored two of the publications that directly address the topic of missing place names of the Gåni Islands. And as mentioned, this is her second time to Saipan, so welcome the two of you. I have thanked them for coming, and then they thanked me for bringing an audience where this information is very relevant to, which is us, the people of the Marianas. So welcome you all. I hope you enjoy your evening. And we'll be here for about an hour, and so some housekeeping. There is a restroom right outside to the left of the theater. There's no food allowed in the venue, but you can have water. But welcome and enjoy the lecture. Please welcome Dr. Stolz and Dr. Levkovych.
So, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here and share our findings with you. And we are here, of course, to learn from you, because we are no experts of the Mariana Islands, no experts of the cultures that meet on the Marianas, and we are also no experts of the place names on the Marianas, but we have made some observations, and I think these observations will be interesting for you as a community, and it's up to you to decide what to make of the findings of the Bremen linguists. So I introduce my co-author, Nataliya Levkovych. She has told me that I have to do the talking, so I have accepted this task. She will be sitting there and giving me signs whether I am telling you lies or something like that. So, okay, we will see to it. Okay, thank you very much again. And what is this all about? Only this morning, Leo Pangelian made this beautiful book a present to me. And while thumbing through the pages, I found a nice quotation to start this talk with. On page 50, under the title Cultural Landscape, it says, "Our ancestors left us clues in everything, in their names, the names of people, places and things. History is there. We today just have to learn it well enough to kind of crack the code of our ancestors to understand exactly what it is they are trying to tell us." And this is what this is about. So there will be a table of contents in a minute. I have to take this over. So. There are so many mics here on the lectern, so thank you very much. There's the table of contents. There are some preliminaries, of course. There will be some slides with a lot of text. I will read the text out to you to get the feel a little bit, And then there are other slides where you simply see single words or just single phrases or maps, mostly maps. We will start from Alamagan, then later on we will find another island and its maps. Then I will have a slideshow, a very quick one, dealing with all the other largely empty maps that you have for the Gåni Islands. Then there is something about Song, and we arrive at our destination, Agrigan's map, and then there is a discussion at the end. So the preliminaries are like this. To avoid getting lost in too many things that superficially do not seem to have anything to do with the Marianas, we directly start with a case study of an interesting phenomenon that caught our attention several years ago, in 2017, when we went over the extant maps of the Gåni Islands in search of place names. What the observed facts entail, why they are of interest to the study of names in general, what concepts are relevant for the interpretation of the givens, and what can be done in the future will be revealed step by step as we go along and elaborated upon in the final part of this talk. So there are only a few of the Gåni Islands that are of interest, special interest for this talk. These are the ones in the reddish box there. These 5 islands will be addressed in the rest of the talk. Today's talk takes up the issues raised in 2 former earlier publications of ours. So in 2020, we have asked ourselves for the first time what to do with these maps without names, because that's something special worldwide. And in 2021, we made some proposals as to remapping the island of Agrigan, for instance. So now we frankly admit to being ignorant about far too many things in connection with the Marianas, their people and their history. We are therefore here to learn from you in lieu of pretending to be able to teach you anything. We kindly ask you to help us to fill the gaps. So there are some very helpful sources. There's this publication, it's not really a publication, it's a report by Captain James B. Johnson, dating back to the 1950s. He was responsible for an expedition for the US Naval Administration of the Mariana Islands, and he had to assess the economic worth of the islands for the US government. And this publication or report was hidden away. There's just one copy of it left, and that's to be found in the Australian National Library at Canberra. And it took some time to get our hands on this report. And then the former member of the Humanities Council of the CNMI, Scott Russell, kindly gave us access to his archives. And he is currently conducting a sister project with special focus on the Chamorro place names on Saipan. So the point of departure is Alamagan's map. It is charted, but nameless. The official map of Alamagan hosts no names for geo-objects on the island, like mountains, hills, valleys, beaches, bays, and so on. There are no names for these geo-objects. There's one exception, and that will be looked at more closely in a sec. So this is the official map of Alamagan, and if you look at the island, if you ignore this part here, you see there is nothing, there is no word written on the map. There are just lines. And this is special. That's the best you can get, because the slide hosts the scan of the most recent official map of Alamagan, dating back to June 1986, when it was printed for the US Defense Mapping Agency and the SCS field personnel. We are unaware of any more recently published map. Thus, we can take this map as our frame of reference for what follows. There is a discipline, we are linguists, but there's another discipline that is mostly concerned with names, only concerned with names. This is onomastics, the science dedicated to the study of names. These phenomena are unknown to onomasticians, so they don't know that there are places in the world where no place names exist. And there is a subdiscipline of onomastics called toponomastics, and this is the subdiscipline that focuses on place names. And there's the idea to draw up a global inventory of all place names given to geo-objects worldwide to create a basis for generalizations about how and for what purposes humans interact with their surroundings by way of naming segments of space. Is this random, or is there a system behind it? So onomasticians believe that there is a system, but we haven't found it yet. So geo-objects, this is an open list: settlements, villages, towns, cities, farms, forests, deserts, beaches, cliffs, rocks, hills, mountains, volcanoes, ponds, rivers, rivulets, slopes, valleys, downs, bogs, moors, bays, promontories, capes, points, deltas, peninsulas, islands, etc. count as geo-objects. And all of them are nameable objects. So there is an expectation of onomasticians in whatever place humans set foot, albeit just for 5 seconds, let's say, they tend to name the geo-objects that they found. So there are many candidates for being named on Alamagan. Alamagan offers a plethora of geo-objects that could be named. If you look at this photo of Alamagan, there are cliffs, there is a rock, there is a point, a bay, a forest, a slope, a peak, a mountain, and so on. Everywhere else in the world, you would find names for these objects, but not on the map of Alamagan. There's a necessity that the island's topography is diverse and characteristically structured, so it's not monotonous. There are thus many geo-objects that invite being named by people who need to communicate to others where on the island a given event took place or a given entity could be found, etc. This is a toponomastic puzzle. Does the absence of place names on Alamagan's map mean that there was never anybody around long enough to act as name giver of geo-objects? The answer is no. Here's a little bit of demographic statistics. There were 18 inhabitants at the beginning of the 20th century. The population peaked in 1957 with 84 people. There were 48 again in 1969, and going down to 6 in 2000. But there was a kind of continuous settlement on the island. The striking fact is that over much of the 20th century, the island was inhabited, although the population used to be relatively small. That's granted. There were also evacuations for some time in between, but nevertheless, there were always people on the island. Can it be that the almost permanent human presence over a century has not left any traces in terms of names that refer to landmarks and other geo-objects of Alamagan? There was a publication in 1971 by Brian. It's just an inventory of all the place names he found in the then US Mandate territory of Micronesia. So it's all Micronesia, and it's just a list. It's a very long list. And what you find for Alamagan is just the island name, Alamagon Island, Alamagontor, Alamagan, and the German version, Alamagan Insel, and so on, but no name for other geo-objects on the island. This is the cover page of the book, Guide to Place Names in the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. And the inventory of place names published 53 years ago. The compiler mentions only the name of the island and the corresponding mostly anachronistic alternatives coined by various former colonizers or travelers. The data were published when the island was still inhabited. However, during the extended period of settlement, the inhabitants of Alamagan must have lived somewhere on the island. And when people live somewhere, they usually give a name to the place where they live. They do not seem to have occupied separate and isolated dwelling places scattered over the island. In point of fact, a closer look at the map reveals that hardly visible to the naked eye, there is a small circle in the southwest near the beach, but somewhat removed from the coastline, that is identified as the location of a village. That's the map again, and you find here in English the dot indicating that's the place where the village is found. And now it's the question whether village is the name of the village or just a common noun used to indicate there is something that falls into under the rubric of village, but we don't know how it was named. But there were most probably at least two villages on the island. It is only logical to assume that this village is where Alamagan's inhabitants used to live together as a community. Interestingly, already for the year 1900, the existence of two villages is reported, namely a workers' village in the south and a village in the northwest. The village featured on our map is perhaps identical with the earlier workers' village, and thus a case of continued human presence in the same location. So the name of the village must have been handed down to the next generation of settlers. The village in the northwest, that is not specified as serving the purposes of workers, cannot be located on our map with any degree of certainty. I quote from this report by Johnson: "There is a small spring at Song Song, which runs all year round but furnishes only enough water for drinking purposes. There is a wooden slide at the northern village of Partido, which is used to slide the sack copra from a high point at the warehouse close to the landing area. There is one rocky landing at Partido, the northwest village, and another rocky landing at Song Song, the southwest village." So we have already two names. There's Song Song and Partido. And we can, let's say, revise the map. This dot here indicates the site of a village, but the village is called Song Song. And there in the green box, there must have been Partido for some time, but we don't know exactly where on the map. So there are some intermediary thoughts. Two settlements have been in existence. The map features only one. Does this mean that in 1986 only Song Song was still inhabited while Partido was deserted? The map identifies Song Song only as a village, that is an English common noun, is used where Chamorro Song Song can be both a common noun meaning village or a place name. Except the settlement, no geo-object is identified on the map. This is remarkable. So our goal is, we are intrigued by the unexpected absence of place names on islands like Alamagan. Our toponomastic mission requires us to do our best to find out whether there have been or are place names that simply have not made it onto the maps, for whatever reason. In case unrecorded place names exist, we suggest that new maps be drawn on which the cartographic gaps are filled in to the benefit of the people of the Marianas and our discipline. To achieve this, we first have to take stock of what is there. There's a footnote. Scott Russell, Personal Communication, mentions the place name Fai, which nothing more is known to us. Neither do we know to what kind of geo-object Fais refers, nor is it possible for us to situate it anywhere on Alamagan. Since we are equally ignorant as to the source from which Scott Russell has taken the place name, we declare ourselves unable to solve the riddle here and now. Perhaps you can do that for us. So there's hard to compare. There's an exception, Porgan's map. Porgan stands out among the Gåni Islands insofar as many place names for a sizable variety of geo-objects are reported and identified as such on the map. Porgan's map belongs to the same set of maps as Alamagan's map, meaning it saw the light of day in June 1986 under the auspices of the US Defense Mapping Agency and SCS field personnel. And here you see many objects are named on the map of Pagan. There are several points. You find mountains, a bay, peninsula, a beach, rocks. There's also a village, several villages, and so on. So if you compare this map to Alamagan, you can't really see a reason for the differential treatment of Pagan and Alamagan, because there are geo-objects of the same kind also on Alamagan, but they have no names. So Pagan, also in this book by Brian, the list of the place names, Brian recorded many place names for Pagan. This is the list for objects on the island. There are, among these place names are Japanese relics, a village and mountains and rocks bear partly or entirely Japanese names on this map. And on account of the data from Pagan's map, the absence on Alamagan's map of place names for geo-objects other than the village calls for an explanation that is not easy to find, especially because Alamagan's map is by no means exceptional in the Gåni context. I just show you the other largely empty maps. The marked case in the Gåni context, the exception is indeed Pagan. The bulk of the Gåni Islands are cartographically of much the same kind as Alamagan. There's a slideshow for 8 islands or groups of islands. They are represented photographically and cartographically on the next slides. I don't have to comment on them. The recurrent theme is the general lack of place names on the maps. Those islands whose maps share with that of Alamagan the indication of a settlement are addressed again in the next part of this talk. So there's Farayon de Medinilla, Anatahan, you see there is hardly anything, Sarigan, no names on the map, Buguan, Agrigan, Asunción, Mauk, Uracas. So these islands are no monolithic entities. The photos suggest that some of the islands are topographically as heterogeneous as Alamagan, in the sense that their surface and coastline are characterized by variation and diversity. In contrast to Pagan, however, except one, none of their prominent geo-objects is identified by name on the map. The exception being village. So there is this recurrent song. Scott Russell identified altogether 4 places called Song on the islands under scrutiny. In addition, he also discovered an instance of Partido. Neither of these place names is found as such on the official maps. No villages are mentioned by Brian for Sarigan and Anatahan. But if you look on the map, you see there in the red circle, village. So on Anatahan, there must have been a village at the time when the map was drawn. That was 1986. It strikes the eye that the word village has been penciled in by hand only after the map itself was ready for publication. So then they had second thoughts about it and then added by hand the village as an afterthought. Johnson tells us there are 2 habitable areas on the northwest and southwest tips of the island. These 2 areas are fairly level, and prior to removal of the natives in 1944, there was a village in each area. The resettlement took place in 1953 when 12 families, 60 persons, were placed thereon. This means there must have been 2 villages at one time. The village named Village on the map, and another placed here in the southwest. Where exactly we don't know, and it's perhaps a candidate for Partido. From Scott Russell's list, I can mention other unidentified places on Anatahan. There are names, but we can't put them to any places. Funny names, I think Arctic Ocean, for instance. What could this be? Banco, Canadulao, and Tabero. So there's also Japanese. Then there is Agrigan's map. We will elaborate upon this in part 6. You see village again. It's down here. Then there is Sarigan's map, but there is a village as a name in the comments you will get, but where to put it exactly on the map is not possible, and there is no indication on the printed map. Johnson tells us that the habitable portion of this island is in the northwest sector, and this area is one of the most nearly level of all areas observed. Due to frequent bombings and strafings, the people spent a good deal of their time in cold, wet caves about 100 yards from their village. So there must have been a village. And even perhaps more than one. The quote sounds like there was only one settlement on Sarigan. However, Scott Russell found evidence of the existence of a second settlement, which went by the name of Partido. Where exactly Partido was situated on the island is still unclear. If Johnson is to believe, Partido could not have been far away from Song. So perhaps the picture looks like this. There is Song in the red part and Partido in the green part, but we can't be sure. So now we have arrived at our destination, and this is a kind of, we are presenting something, what can happen in terms of redrawing the map of an island, Agrigan's map. This is a summary of our earlier publication. Germany was once a colonizer in the Northern Marianas, and you find German maps, but the islands are represented in such small size that you can't find any place names on the islands. There are also Japanese maps that can be found, but it turned out that the Japanese maps are direct, let's say, translations of pre-existing maps. So there are no additional names on this. And then there is McAfee, also taken from a military report from 1945, where in this report it is described how the Americans occupied the island when the Japanese were still there. And of course, to orient themselves on the island, the Americans had to use place names. And on Agrigan's map, we know that there is the indication of village there as a repetition. And if you look at this book by Brian, you find again practically only the island name, several versions of it, but also Agrigan Anchorage, Agrigan Boiti, and Agrigan, the German version, Ankerplatz, meaning the same, so they refer to something where ships can reach the island. And there are 11 additional place names registered by Scott Russell, but not located on the map, as Biha, as Mahalang, as Peligro, Tsapanis, Gonek, Lanzotalo, Nonak, Pahong, Quiroga, Santa Cruz, Talakatan. And we have looked at possible sites for these place names to put on the map. We have looked at different kinds of geo-objects, and there are rivulets, peaks, slopes, plateaus, structured coastline with bays and so on. And we have identified these places and then tried to put the names from Scott Russell's list on this map. And then we find that Quiroga and Santa Cruz refer to the peaks of the mountains, for instance. This is also possible on the basis of Johnson's report about the islands. So it is possible to redraw the map with a number of not so clear cases because there are alternatives. This place could either be Pahong or Nona, or this place could be Pahong or Nona. This could be as Biha, as Mahalang, as Peligro. This is clearly Tsapanis because that's from the American map of 1945. You can look at this. Lanzotalo could be in the north and so on. So there are many uncertainties, but we can narrow down the possibilities for putting names to places on the island. So now we are reaching the point of discussion. The data convey a very clear message. At least in the past, there used to be place names for geo-objects also for several of those islands whose modern maps are devoid of place names beyond the reference to a village. Thus, the toponomastic dogma has been proved right. Human presence correlates with the existence of a toponomasticon, that is the system of place names employed within a given geo-context, in a country, on an island, in a city, and so on. So far, we have reconstructed only fragments of the erstwhile toponomasticons of a selection of the Gåni Islands. There remains the puzzling fact that the place names mentioned in this talk are absent from the official maps. Can this be explained by reference to negligence on the part of the cartographers? Was the necessary information about place names withheld by those who had the knowledge or those who were in charge of the cartographic projects? Is this a deliberate attempt at lying with maps? There's a book about this, not about the Marianas case, but general. Famous cartographer, Momonier, has published a book, it's a bestseller, How to Lie with Maps. And on naming places, I refer to a different project of a colleague of mine and myself. Having the right to name places is important for people. Those who inscribe themselves on the map of a given territory virtually lay claim to the territory. So if there are Chamorro names or Carolinian names, this means that this territory forms part of the cultural sphere of these people. If the names are Spanish or English, it's a different story. It is thus politically of utmost importance either to give names to as many places as possible or to erase former place names coined by others from the map. Reconstructing the toponomasticon of old may help to demonstrate that the Gåni Islands form part of the CNMI as an important element of the cultural history of the Marianas. So this is just a reference to the other publication. And then here's a project proposal. Given that we are facing remembered but still unregistered place names, we fear that an important component of the cultural heritage of the Marianas is in danger of falling into oblivion. To safeguard the knowledge of the former inhabitants of the Gåni Islands to the benefit of the future generations, an effort should be made to recover the presumably rich stock of place names and document them in the format of an annotated and culturally well-informed atlas. This is the final slide. We offer our assistance in terms of linguistic and toponomastic expertise to lend a helping hand to those who are willing to attempt to reconstruct the missing place names. We have initiated a collaboration with Leo Pangelinan at the Humanities Council. It is hoped that former inhabitants of the Gåni Islands share their memories with the project team, because without their support, the atlas will not be feasible in the first place. Thank you very much.
Dr. Stolz, we want to open it for questions. Question and answer. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and just raise your hand and then share. I'm going to put a QR code for an evaluation, if you can evaluate the talk tonight. But yeah, just raise your hand if you have any questions for Dr. Stolz.
Is there any correlation between population size and volume of names? Like,
not necessarily.
Okay.
So we have experience with other uninhabited islands, for instance, near the South Pole. There are Norwegian possessions there, funnily enough, down south. Bouvet Island is, for instance, a case. Nobody ever lived there for any longer period because it's uninhabitable for climatic reasons. But explorers went there for a short trip and named all the possible geo-objects on the island. Now there are fully covered maps of this island, or in Norway, you can look at them, and every geo-object there has a name. It is registered. but nobody lives there, so nobody uses these names. So it's not really a direct correlation. Perhaps there is something about it, we don't know exactly, but nobody so far has detected that there is a correlation.
You had a slide, I think it was of Alamagan, where you took Scott Russell's research and you said that there's possibilities that certain objects, geo-objects, could have these potential names. How did how did Scott Russell's research help you inform where the name belongs or potential name belongs?
It was in combination with the Johnson's report. Only in combination with the Johnson's report it was possible to identify some of the geo-objects. The name list alone didn't help very much because it was not indicated which class of geo-object was referred to by a given name. So it was not possible to say this is a village, this is a mountain, this is, let's say, a rivulet or something like this. But in combination with the information we got from the report, and it's really scarce information in a way, it was possible to identify some of the places. But chances are that we guessed wrong. So these are just hypothetical maps at the moment.
I'm so sorry. What would it take to confirm? What would it take to confirm that the name you guessed is the actual name?
The evidence of former inhabitants. So if they say, yes, I remember, we used to name this part of the island, then of course this is hard proof. As long as those people who remember, it's possible to reconstruct the place names in a reliable way. If they are no longer around and only their offspring in a way is able to say, yes, my grandfather used to refer to something that was called then again chances are this could be right, but it's perhaps also wrongly remembered. So we don't know. So we need the help of those people who had the experience, personal experience of the islands.
Yes, Dr. Stolz, this is a really sensitive issue that you are stepping into. You know that the land to us is very valuable. We have so little of it, and over time during the colonial periods, they've been naming places, and like you said, you're taking ownership, and that has been done throughout the world. I think when we name places, we need to be very careful how we do it, because a lot of the people who know those names, and let's face it, all the islands in Micronesia, even a little corner here or there, they have names. And they either name them, based on who was there, what event took place, who died there, and ancestors. They name them after ancestors. So when you do your research and ask people who might know, that's another critical issue, because who might know? And I think we need to balance what is the purpose of creating names if we're not sure. And when are we going to be sure that is the right name for that particular place? And who owns that place? So at present, who are the owners of those areas that are not named? But there were names. There are names, but they are not written by the map makers because they're not interested.
Yes, they were not.
They're only interested in the villages where people are, or in the places that they want to take over, that they want to control, that they want to settle. So, for example, Capitol Hill, that's where the Americans named that place Capitol Hill, whatever. But we really need to think about the sensitivity of naming places.
Yeah, I know
And I like the way you ended that statement, that you would look for people who might know, but people who might know can also create their own stories.
Yes, of course.
So
Of
there
course.
is really that danger. Anyway, I just wanted to say.
You can't get rid of this problem. This is, you have to be your informant, as you call them in linguistics, the people you talk to get information about their world in a way. You have either to trust them or mistrust them. So if you trust them because they are perhaps your family relations, you draw up a list of possible place names, and perhaps a second or third list for the same island by other people who live there. Then you can compare this, and for the atlas, it's just, let's say, for the atlas, without the implications that we now claim these places for family, for instance. It's more about claiming the places for the entire community. I think that's what you can achieve for the individuals, their families, and so on. I would say that it's much too loaded, politically loaded, to do this. And we are more or less observers, and we have no right to interfere with the political decisions within the community. So we don't want to influence your decision taking. It's just we observe this. Is this interesting for you? Will you do something about it? But that's up to you. If you decide, no, it's really too risky for the community to recreate the former system of place names, leave it as it is. Or you create new names from scratch.
Some people who are alive still that might be able to give names of particular places. And maybe there are ways to validate those. So it's an endeavor that's really, really interesting. But
yeah, that's a matter. If it's uninteresting, it's uninteresting. And I can't tell you. It's interesting for my discipline. If it's not interesting for the community or the individuals, of course, it's a completely different story. Yeah.
I have a question. Can you tell us a little bit more about your resources and what you have found in your research? And if you have looked into the German administration from 1898 to 1914, or what you have found from
that's what we have currently discussed, where we recently discussed with Scott Russell, because he wants to reconstruct the Chamorro place names before the pre-colonial Chamorro place names for Saipan. And he looked at the German maps from that time, and they are not informative. That's the story. There is very little, there are very few place names on German maps. There is a hand-drawn map, and there are several published maps during the time. You find exactly 4 place names, and these are place names that still exist, so there's nothing new about that. The Germans drew up also a kind of, we call this a land cadastre system. And I don't know whether it exists anymore because the archives got lost somehow. So perhaps you can use this. But I know a different case also from the Pacific. They did the same, the Germans in Samoa. Samoa was a German colony there, and they drew up a very exact land cadastre. And the Samoan government has forbidden the publication of this cadastre because it would create turmoil in the Samoan society because of the land rights. The same thing. So at the moment, we can say the German sources are not very helpful about this. Perhaps very old Spanish sources, but I've seen in this nice book I showed you at the beginning that some of the very important early maps from the 17th century have got lost. The one of and all the other maps have gone. People knew they were there, but they're no longer there. Perhaps there are some where in the Library of Vatican, hidden away somewhere, and somebody has to look for them for ages to find them.
Oh, yeah.
So, Dr. Stolz, when we first talked about this research interest of yours, we had talked finding a way to bring the Northern Islands, residents of the Northern Islands together, or their descendants, and have an exhibit, maps that currently exist, and have a conversation about their memories of places, and whether or not there were names or phrases. And at the time, it didn't occur to me until listening to your lecture, if we had an official process in our Commonwealth for going back and naming places. In my lifetime, I've only experienced and know there's a process for assigning names to our streets, assigning names to buildings, but not geo objects, right? Not village names. In fact, the most recent effort in our community on Saipan around place names was our mayor of Saipan initiating a project to collapse the number of villages and have, like, villages that were contiguous to each other, collapsing them and choosing a name among, let's say, 4 villages. And so that from 75 villages on Saipan, we would instead have 35, something like that. And there was a process the mayor went through to get community feedback. It went to the legislature. But to my recollection, it kind of died, I think, because we don't have a new map today with 35 villages. We still, in our minds, know that we still have the 70-some villages.
Yeah, there's of course a difference between a printed map and the memory of the people. So if they use the names, they can use the names also when they're not on the map.
Yeah.
But then they somehow might get lost because they're not really properly handed down to the next generation. So people are only used to the official names and don't know about the unofficial names. And the unofficial names were the names that were around, or they were important for the culture, whereas the official names were just official names in a way, but then they are gone. Nobody knows anymore about these names. If this is of cultural importance for the community, I think you have to do something, and that is my personal opinion in this way. If you think it's either too risky or too not important enough, you can leave it as it is.
Yeah, and one of my questions to you is, since you looked into this issue, have you also uncovered what is the viable process to make it official? So let's say we do bring the community together, there's consensus about a name for a certain place on Alamagan. What's the next step?
I'm not an expert for this kind of recreations of toponomastics, as they say, but there are many cases worldwide, especially in post-colonial and decolonial situations. South Africa is very famous for this. They have committees that organize let's say, the change of the map. So all the Dutch names have to disappear from the map. The English names have to disappear, and they have to be replaced by Bantu names and so on. But then it turns out many of the villages and cities have never been settled before by Bantu people. So they were colonial foundations. There were no Bantus before that. Other people were there. They are no longer around. So what to do? It's not really recollecting the past, but getting rid of a past you don't want to have. That's what happens. So these are issues I don't want to, let's say, settle for you, because they're too. This is really dangerous ground.
Well, one other thought I had was about the word vice. Vice is also an island in the Caroline Islands. And we know the Caribbeans have settled these islands as well, so I just wanted to mention that there may be a connection between
Makes
that
sense.
and a place.
Makes sense. Yeah. I'm still wondering about Arctic Ocean. So yeah, thank you very much for facts.
Any other questions?
If further questions come up later, you can send us an email anyway, so that's no problem.
Recorded, so it'll be good to share your question.
I think even less than we know about place names in Gåni. I think a lot of our community doesn't really know much about the name Gåni itself.
Mhm.
And I've been doing a lot of research all summer looking for maps that say Lagos and Gåni on there, but I just can't find anything. So I was wondering if you found any source that had
No, the answer is no.
and I've been really looking into this name. I found a recent Harvard Divinity publication that came out this year. I found some publications from Guam, some press releases that contain Lagos and Gåni as names. I've also tried to look into postdoctoral research of someone in Australia. They reference a tenured professor from Guam who studies anthropology, who says that there are early 17th century sources, Spanish sources that show these names in there, but I tried to get in contact with him. Unfortunately, he passed last year. So I was wondering, in your expertise, was there any case of at least trying to find that name in there, and why have you chosen to use Gåni instead of Northern Islands?
I don't know, really. I think you have to, we never really pursued this direction to solve the riddle of the Gåni name itself. We were more interested in these names on the individual islands. But I suggest that you get in touch with Carlos Madrid, the University of Guam, and then perhaps also Rafael Rodriguez Ponga in Salamanca in Spain. Yes, in Spain. He's an expert of Chamorro, by the way, and he knows a lot about the history, the Spanish history of the islands, and he has access to the Spanish archives because he's a high-ranking politician. So perhaps he could help you to find the maps or these references you need. We don't know anything about this.
Okay, thank you so much.
But send an email to us and I can give you the names and email addresses. Yeah.
I'm wondering how common is this problem where you see a map with like almost no names on it?
Uncommon. Very, very uncommon. It's really, as I told you, for instance, yes, there are many uninhabited islands that were never settled at any time, as far as we know, where you find hundreds of names, dozens of names at least. It's absolutely exceptional that you find islands that were settled, at least for some time, where no names exist. So the Gåni case is really a special case. It's perhaps not a unique case. Perhaps there are somewhere else islands where you find similar things. But I would expect that these islands are located in climatic zones where humans don't dare to go. So that's a reason for no names existing on these islands. We know there is an island, we have a name for the island, but nobody wants to go there. And okay, now you can do it by plane or by satellite or whatever to draw a map for this. But for settled places, the Gåni Islands are really among the very few exceptions worldwide. And that makes them additionally interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Could I ask another question?
Yeah.
Is one of the purposes to find the Chamorro names, the authentic Chamorro names of those islands, or the names that have changed over time during the colonial period?
The initial idea was we did a completely different research and then stumbled across the phenomenon. So it wasn't our idea to look for the Chamorro names. We wanted to see what names are there on these maps because we wanted to draw up an inventory of place names in formerly colonized countries.
I think it's important to do that because the names themselves, the words, can elicit cultural information on those places, the history of those people. And since we were oral culture, that's how we lost a lot of information because the map makers, cartographers, what you call them, they're not interested in what we know. And why should they bother? You know, there's
Yeah,
too many.
that's also my idea.
Yeah, and they have their own motives for making maps. So the map maker, you know, has his own motive, really. And that's how all these maps in the world happen.
I agree. I
It's
fully
like
agree.
God divided the world into half.
But we didn't expect to find this for the
Right.
Northerly Islands
So
because there are names on the Southerly Islands. So why?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you're trying to find the tomorrow names.
No, it's now part of the project, of course, but at the beginning, no. We just wanted to take an inventory of all names, whether Spanish, English, Japanese, or Chamorro or Carolinian. Didn't matter at that time, but there were no names at all. So that was the surprise for us.
All right, we'll take one more question.
On the left.
I noticed on the possible village names, there's at least 2 Chamorro names for trees. I've never been to the Northern Islands, but I think Mr. Pangilinan has sailed there before. I'm wondering if there's any concentration or strands of forest of ahong
Yes.
and also the non. So that might be a clue.
Palm trees or
Bahong is screw pine.
Uh-huh.
Maybe the reason why they named it is because that's where the concentration of those plants were.
Okay.
That's why canola would be grown in that specific spot of the island because otherwise it won't grow anywhere else because maybe because of the dirt or
Okay.
too much rock or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, we need this.
The bahong
this
will
kind of
grow
information.
where it's nice and cool.
Yeah. Thanks for the question and thanks for the elucidations.
All right, Dr. Stolz. Thank you for, can we give another round of applause?
Thank you very much. We have to thank you that you were with us for your patience and the interesting discussion, because now we have got some new ideas and inspirations for continuing with the project. Thank you very much.
Let me just add, before everyone leaves, if you want to connect with Dr. Stolz and contribute to his research and trying to find some solutions to some of the puzzles he's posited for us today, let the Northern Marianas Humanities Council know, and we'll make sure we'll facilitate putting you guys in touch. Okay?
Yes, you can distribute our email address,
Yes,
so that's no problem. I can't guarantee